Hello and welcome to NAFA's webinar, Smart Mobility Institute, Session 3, Mobility, Convergence Between Fleet, Travel, and HR. My name is Danelle Holberg, and I am NAFA's meeting coordinator. Today's webinar will be moderated by David Hayward, member of NAFA's Board of Directors. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping details. This session is being recorded. A recording of the presentation will be available after the presentation. For those of you who may not be familiar with the GoToWebinar software being used today, this webinar has a question and dialogue box on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question, please type it in the box and submit it. The questions will be moderated during the webinar, but will be handled at the end of the presentation. At this point, I would like to turn things over to David.
Greetings and welcome to our third session of these Smart Mobility Thursdays. On behalf of NAFA and the NAFA Board of Directors, I'm delighted to welcome you all and to thank Stephen Schiff and Nexus Communication and the Smart Mobility Institute for partnering with us on these excellent sessions. Without further ado, I shall pass it over to Stephen to do our introductions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Danelle, and also thank you to NAFA. I can tell you as Chief Editor of Fleet Europe, Global Fleet and Smart Mobility Management that we are really happy that we can talk to you about the, let's say, transformation from fleet to mobility management, something that we see happening in Europe since quite a while. We have established the Smart Mobility Institute last year on demand, let's say, of fleet managers of multinational companies who are looking into solutions that can be of added value for their employees next to the traditional company car. Today, in this third session of the Smart Mobility Thursdays, we are going to deep dive into the mobility convergences between fleet, travel, and HR. Why? Because it can be useful that within a multinational organization, you start looking at the different stakeholders where mobility plays a role. And even more so than with company cars, we believe that when we talk about new mobility solutions, that not only procurement and fleet are involved, but that also categories like travel, where you have rental cars, for example, and HR, because they often are responsible when it comes to benefits for the employees, that of course those categories need to be involved in the discussion around mobility. And when you set up a mobility management strategy, it can be good to look already at what are, let's say, the common aspects of those different categories. And in Europe, we did a session last year around the same topic. And so we would like a little bit also highlight what we have learned in Europe from these and the previous sessions, and then go a little bit further in how, in a practical way, you can, let's say, take your fleet management to a mobility management, looking at the mobility convergences between fleet, travel, and HR. Now, if we look a little bit forward, then you see that we have different experts in this webinar. So first we have Yves Helven, he is our mobility expert. We also have two case studies. We have Franz Fehlner, who is responsible for the global fleet, the international fleet at Allianz, one of the most, let's say, advanced technology companies. You probably know them, for example, for their insurance solutions, but they are much bigger than that across the globe. And we have Pascal Struyve, who has really a long track in global fleet management, but is also the president of the Belgian Association for Travel Management. And so he is really well placed to give a look around what is the insight of travel when it comes to mobility. And these gentlemen are going to detail in the next 45 minutes the topic around mobility convergences between fleet, travel, and HR. Now, if we look a little bit at the agenda that I already mentioned, then you see that the fifth element, and that is really important, is the Q&A. So we will have a Q&A at the end of today's webinar. And as Denel also mentioned, you can send the questions that you have for the expert speakers to the questions box in your webinar tool. And at the end, David Hayward of NAFA and myself, we will try to moderate a short, engaging Q&A with our experts. So I mentioned to you that the Smart Mobility Institute was launched in 2019, and really on demand, let's say, of multinational companies and their fleet managers. And there are two things that are really important, I think. The first one is that those fleet managers of multinational companies, they would like to learn what they need to do when going to a new mobility management program. And secondly, they would like to be inspired. And so very important in the Smart Mobility Institute is that we have case studies like you also will witness today, in which people from the ground, let's say, fleet managers, mobility managers, are sharing best practices. And this will, of course, enhance also inspiration within your organization. So you can see now that we already in Europe have quite of the, let's say, some of the largest multinational companies that are really going into that mobility management. You see some names here on the screen that are members of the Smart Mobility Institute. And the thing is, of course, that in Europe, there is on the one hand, like in North America, there is now the evolution in terms of urbanization. But on the other, we also see that there is governmental legislative pressure on the company car. And so multinational companies are a little bit looking now, what are the ideal solutions next to the company car? And in Europe, we have next to, let's say, the company car as a tool, also the per car. So you can imagine that that per car could be, let's say, questioned around how to use it in the future and what can then be the ideal alternative. And often you come then to new mobility solutions, but the exercise, it's not always straightforward. And that is why we have created the Smart Mobility Institute to gather those multinational companies and to give them the opportunity to discuss among them how they see mobility management for their organization. So this is the third webinar of 4. So we will have the final session in August, on the 27th of August. And there we will really go into the practical details about establishing a framework for an international request for mobility. So for mobility as a service. There we would like to take you really into the first, let's say, big exercise, how to go into your organization and into the market when you are looking for the ideal solutions around mobility management. So please already save the date, the 27th of August, when we will have the final session of these Smart Mobility Thursdays. But now let's kick off with a first presenter of the day, and that is Yves Helven. He is our global fleet expert, but also our mobility expert, and he is going to recap a little bit the previous sessions that we already organized. Welcome, Yves.
Thank you for the introduction, Stephen and David, and welcome everyone to this session of the Smart Mobility Institute. Like Stephen mentioned, let's spend a few minutes together and recap the 2 previous editions. Our objective throughout the NAFA sessions on mobility is to give you some insights in the European mobility market from the professional client's point of view. The most common understanding of the concept of corporate mobility is the alternative to a company car. This alternative can be either public transport, micromobility, such as bicycles and scooters, and car-centric mobility, such as car sharing, ride sharing, and ride hailing. By extension, solutions like shared office space or home working can also be considered as mobility. It's not just about how people move, but also about how we can reduce business mileage. The European mobility ecosystem is a very diverse one. Most of the suppliers are city-based, and very few suppliers have a Europe-wide solution to offer. The supply chain is also very young and most often consists of startups that are not making any real money. We do see some big investors behind the startups, such as Google, Tencent, SoftBank, Toyota, BMW, or Mercedes. Mobility has become a corporate topic because across Europe, employees don't need their cars as much as they used to, say, 20 years ago. The average mileage of a company car in Europe has decreased from about roughly 30,000 miles a year to below 15,000 miles a year. This leads to the conclusion that from an asset efficiency point of view, a company car does no longer make sense and alternatives need to be put in place. Especially for Europe, there are some reasons why the company car is no longer as adequate as it was before. Our taxation on company cars is increasing. Younger generations prefer usership models rather than ownership models. And also, European cities are increasingly reducing the number of cars in city centers. Finally, Finally, companies have sustainability goals and need to reduce CO2 emissions. So the corporate client is creating a huge commercial opportunity for the mobility suppliers, but still the uptake is limited. Here is why. First, mobility suppliers focus on the consumer client and not the corporate client. Professional clients, as you know very well, need a different type of relationship with their suppliers. Next, it's not easy to remove company cars from the employee. European employees pay tax on their company cars and consider it as part of their salary, even when it's a tool of trade. Finally, the mobility ecosystem is not a mature one, and today it's not yet possible to match the convenience of a car with mobility solutions. So the next question should be, what is the correct positioning of mobility? Our suggestion is to move away from the idea that mobility can replace the car. Here are a couple of facts that help us understand the true value of mobility. For one, even if mobility cannot replace the company car, it can be a great alternative for certain trips. For instance, public transport or a bike are much more efficient than a car for a trip inside city centers. Also, when we look at the trends that are happening in the HR world, especially in employee benefits and total rewards, we see a shift from fixed benefits to flexible benefits. This means that employees can create their own benefit package in function of their needs and their lifestyle. Mobility fits in really well with this new concept of flexible benefits. Finally, mobility has the potential to contribute to a mixture of corporate objectives, such as sustainability, savings, digitizations, and shifts in business model. So before I hand back to Stephen and the other presenters, the conclusions of our first two SMI, Smart Mobility Institute sessions, is that mobility is a very strong proposal, but it still needs to evolve. In order to accelerate that evolution, the supply chain needs to become more mature and it needs to adapt to professional clients. This professional client also needs to change and stop looking at the company car as the default solution. This requires policy change, collaborations between different corporate functions, and especially it requires courage. So that's it for the recap of the previous sessions. Stephen, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yves, for giving a recap of the two previous sessions. As mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, we have today for you two case studies. And the first one is already a very exciting one. Allianz is one of the biggest companies in Europe, and their global sourcing and procurement, global travel and mobility guy, Franz Fehlner, is with us today. You can see already in his function that Franz is combining, let's say, the different categories that we are going to talk about. You see sourcing, procurement, travel, mobility. So Franz knows everything about this topic. And he also has, with his organization, already undertaken some initiatives into an intelligent mobility management that goes beyond the traditional company car that we use for 4 or 5 years in the company. And so, talking about convergences between fleet, travel, and HR, Franz is, of course, well placed to give his insights into what you can do when you take this journey. And so we are really pleased, Franz, that you have taken the time from Munich to be with us today. And so I hope that you are doing fine and that you are safe.
Yes, so thank you very much, Stephen, for the introduction. So my side, everything is fine. So, and I'm really happy that I'm here today and to give you some insights, what we have done in the past and what we are looking for in the future.
Okay, good. So to the people, if you have questions for Franz during the presentation, you can send them via the questions box in the GoToWebinar tool. And at the end of the webinar, we will, of course, like I mentioned before, have a short Q&A where we can ask also your questions to Franz. So Franz, if you are ready, please go ahead, kick off.
Okay, so now let's start. So as you can see, I am at Global Travel MICE and Mobility team. So my boss is also taking care of travel and MICE. So MICE means meeting, incentive, convention, and events. So we are really one unit. So at Allianz, so one department which is taking care of everything in this category. So for me, I'm the mobility part, so I'm the global category leader, fleet management and services at Allianz Technology, responsible for more than 20,000 company cars, plus 12,000 for our independent agencies around in Germany. And we are in over 70 countries, and we have over 900 different operational entities. So, but to be very honest, we are only working with 50, 60 of this really, I would say, close together. With the other ones, they are on the paper, but yeah, as you can imagine, you cannot do it that you are always in contact with every one of these 900 different entities. So you can also write me an email afterwards if you want to do connect with me over LinkedIn. So now I'm clicking. Okay, it's too fast. So one step back. One moment. So Allianz, what is Allianz? Allianz is mainly known as an insurance company, but we are also doing in the US, for example, maybe you know PIMCO is our investment banking company, which is based near to San Francisco. We have Fireman's Fund, maybe this is also a company you know, and yeah, Allianz Life is in the US. So a lot of companies which are in the US, and we are one of the biggest insurance providers, as I said before. We are also in the Dow Jones index named as gold rated for the sustainability, for our sustainability programs. And we are amongst the top 5 asset management companies globally. Okay, so sorry. Then I want to give you an insight. What are our 3 pillars, or what I'm responsible for? So in the fleet management is not the right term anymore, so it's more or less mobility management. Why? This is covered later, but I want to talk now over the 3 pillars. So first of all is strategy. This means I'm responsible for the creating development of the fleet and mobility strategy, the harmonization of the car mobility policies over all Allianz entities. If you can imagine, if you have different companies like maintenance guys and you have investment bankers, so the gap is huge and the difference are also huge. So one needs a tool car, the other one needs a really nice car. So it's different, but you have to find a solution which fits for everybody. So this is what we are doing in the strategy part, also to bundle the finance models. That not one is doing outright purchase, the other one is doing some other financial models, the other one is doing leasing or whatever. So we want to bundle it and we want to harmonize it, so that we have one solution which is in the Allianz company. Then outsourcing of operative processes. This means that we are working with partners which are on a global base, and we are outsourcing our operative processes to this partner, and we work together with them. This is also one of our targets, and the realization, of course, that we want to have more transparency over a consolidated reporting data pool. So the middle of everything is, of course, sourcing and procurement. So we are doing also tenders. We are negotiating discounts with OEMs, with leasing partners, fuel card providers, energy. Now it's more and more important, and also with mobility providers for the whole Allianz Group, always on a global level. And the other thing is that we are doing the vendor management for our key suppliers. We run some cost efficiency programs because we are placed in sourcing and procurement. And for us, it is also really important to save some money and to be cost efficient. The other thing is, the third pillar is a shared service center. This is something what I've explained in the strategy part. This is the outsourcing part of the operative processes. So what we are doing here is to work with external partners to manage the whole life cycle management, to doing the ordering process, not in a manual, but in a digital way. The other thing is that we use these best practices from the different service providers and make the transition from these best practices to the Allianz world. So it's not always easy, and it does not always fit 100%, but it's always good to talk to other people and to see how they are doing those things and how they solve these problems and how they overcome those hurdles. So, and that's why we are using always the knowledge in the market, and we talk to fleet peers, we talk to service providers, we talk to nearly everybody, and to find the right solution for Allianz. So it's not always says that you have to reinvent the wheel. No, it's always to find the best solution. Maybe it's on the market, and then you can implement it also in your environment. So the other thing is that we bundle the expertise in one department, as I explained before. So we are doing some outsourcing processes, but not to reduce only or to reduce FTEs. No, it's more or less to make the transition from an operational FTE to a strategic one, because you need, if you have not too much operational processes anymore, then you need more strategic people, and this is where we make the transition from the task of the people. Then control and check of the consequent and correct usage of group contracts. So this is a compliance part. Of course, we are responsible for these contracts, and we have to make sure that all contracts are in place. And also the suppliers, we have to check with suppliers, and also internally if everything is fine. So the target is the management of the mobility value chain at one fleet competence center. So the next slide shows you the global fleet manager today. So yeah, it's difficult because you have to meet all the needs from different people, from HR people, from finance, sourcing, young professionals, and everybody needs something else. So if you're looking at the HR people, they are looking for the best people on the market, and how can they win the war of talent. So they are looking for nice cars. So today they are looking not only for cars, they are looking for mobility solutions and something how they can attract these young professionals you have on the left side. So how can you attract them and how can you win them for your company? So it's not so easy, because you have to find a really good and cool solutions, because these guys really sophisticated with mobility solutions, and that's why you have to fulfill this demand of these people. The other thing is we have the top management board members, so you need completely different solutions from them, and you have also your perks. You have your managers. They want to have a nice car, and you have sales force. They want to have comfortable things. They're not so interested in mobility solutions. They want a fixed company car. Managers, maybe you can talk to them. Some of them are also happy with the train ticket, for an example. And you have the CSR department. and they say to you, hey, please reduce the carbon footprint of your company. So how can you do it? So of course, one thing is don't order any cars, but this is not the solution. So you have to find the right balance between maybe hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and also to make the restrictions that nobody can use a combustion engine anymore. So this is something everybody is looking for at the moment at Allianz. So the next thing is, how does fleet and travel work together? So it's not so different, because in the travel world you have your global travel policy or travel regulation, or whatever you want to call it, and in the fleet world you have your car and mobility policy. So you have two policies, and both are in our case at HR. So you are a consultant for HR, and you have to talk to them. And there are some points maybe you can combine both, and then you have, instead of a car policy, a mobility policy, which also covers travel. So it's not too bad to have it in one policy. The other thing is the OBT, or online booking tool. So in the fleet world, it's a car configurator. You have travel agencies. In our case, it's a fleet management provider. So you see a lot of points here. You have business intelligence tools. You have global reporting tool on the fleet side. You have traveler security. You have road safety training. So you see there are a lot of points today. It's not so different. Maybe there are different companies which are covering these things. Yeah, of course. But from the, I would say, from the structure and how you can handle it, it's more or less the same. So of course the needs may be different, but at the end of the day, you're talking for a payment solution. Doesn't matter if it is a credit card or a fuel card or a service card or something like that. Doesn't matter. It's a payment solution. If you want to have an online booking tool, maybe someday Amadeus Citric will also be able to make a car configurator. I don't know, or as the way around. I don't know. Maybe some guys from the fleet will make a cool configurator. We can also book your trips. So I don't know, but this maybe is the future, and it comes together. So on the next slide, you see once more today. So fleet manager is looking for company cars and maybe a train ticket or something like that. But in the future, it's more. So what Yves said before, it's really interesting, because a mobility budget, this is for me the end solution of it. Yeah, because why? Because you can bundle everything under this mobility solution. So you can have a bicycle, you can have a motorbike, you can say, okay, if you save some credits on this mobility budget, you can use it for a holiday trip, you can use it for a company car, you can use it for a train, you can use it for electric charging your car, you can use it for a boat trip or something else. So you can do really everything. And this is, for me, the best solution. At the moment, we have not found the right partner to do it, and we don't have, to be very honest, we don't have the scalability, and we don't have the people which are open to implement from their heart, and from their head. They say, okay, I go for this kind of a flexibility. At the moment, everybody's looking for a nice company car, but I'm sure in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, it will change. And then we need something like a mobility budget. We need mobility as a service provider, and not only cars, we need something else. And I'm really sure that this will overcome in the next year. So on the next slide, and it's my last slide, and then I'm ready. So I just want to give you some hints how I did it in the past, because at Allianz, I give you some background. So in September, the CEO board from our holding was at our department and said, hey, please support us. We need a new policy for cars. So we had the first discussions afterwards. I said, no, we don't need a car policy. We need a mobility policy. And then it was interesting because we said, okay, how you want to do it? Yeah, please do everything in this policy, mobility budget, everything. And then we go to our people and ask them, what do you want? And everybody said company car, and nobody said train ticket or something like that. So it's difficult, and then you have to go back to your board member and say, hey, it's a nice idea, but time is not ready. So, and he said, yeah, but other companies are doing it. So we have asked around about 10 global players, which we know, and asked them, do you have a real mobility policy in place, and do you have a real mobility budget? And nobody has it at the moment. So this is clear, and this is why we also said, okay, we have to be clear in our target setting. So what do we want to change today? So the first step was now that we include bicycles. Yeah, we have since years, and then we also add train tickets as an alternative. So you can get, instead of a car, you can get also a train ticket. But of course, this is not the best thing and not the solution. What we are looking for, a mobility solution to combine more things. Huh? Then, of course, you have to find the right setup internally, externally, global contracts, policies, what is in place today, and how can you make the transition from what you have at the moment and what you need in the future. And then make external benchmarks. This is what I explained before. So we have asked, 10 global companies, which we know, which has the same size as Allianz. We have talked to leasing companies and so on and so on. And we have made the benchmark. And this is also really, really interesting, because then you can also say, okay, look at it. Nobody has it. So these are the people, I have talked to them, I have made it. Find the decision maker. So this is also really important. So it's maybe the guy who comes to you and say, please make it, is not the one who makes at the end of the decision. So get in touch with him, and as often as you can. And this is just for a coffee, it's always good, because then you see how is the status, what is looking for, what are his needs, and so on. So it's always good to be in touch with him. So define a transparent roadmap, because it comes a day and the people will say to you, when can we start and what is in. So please be sure that you have a transparent roadmap. Then make sure that you have the right partners for your new setup. So the right leasing partners. Maybe you have to close contracts with charging infrastructure providers, with mobility providers. Maybe in some countries, for example, in the Benelux, so there are really good solutions for this mobility thing. In Germany, okay, there are some, but not. It's a stage that we want to have. So prepare the business case, of course, because we are in the sourcing department. You have to say, okay, it costs so much money, or you will save some money. And this is always critical. And maybe you can overcome this point if you're talking about carbon footprint, because this comes more and more in the discussion, and everybody's looking for it. And everybody says, how can we reduce it, and how can we meet our targets at the end of the day with the carbon footprint? And this is also maybe a door opener at the moment, that you say, okay, with the carbon footprint reduction, you can meet your targets at the board level. So maybe it's always good. And be as often as you can in touch with your stakeholders. This is something what I said before. Then implementation has to be done step by step. So we will not do the big bang. So we will do the following. We will start with the Allianz Holding afterwards, or together with us, with Allianz Technology. And afterwards, we will overcome, I would say, entity by entity, but not as a big bang. Why we do it like this? It's easy, because we learn during the implementation phase maybe the process is not round at the moment. Maybe we can optimize something. Maybe we can introduce something. Maybe we have forgotten something and we have to add some partners, or we have to add some products. And this is something, if you have it really with a big bang, and you have to talk if you look at Allianz to 900 different people, forget it. So start with a small number, and then you can do the big bang afterwards. So always be clear and go below the surface. So this is my motto, and yeah. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Franz. Thank you for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question for Franz, please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar tool, because after the insights of our next expert, we will have a short Q&A round with the experts. Our next expert is Pascal Struyve. Pascal is based in Belgium. He has a long time worked in a global fleet and travel role for a multinational company, and he has really good insights when it comes to how fleet, but of course travel, is linked to mobility, as he is also the president of the Belgian Association for Travel Managers. And so, Pascal, we are eager to hear your story about how travel is dealing with mobility, and what for you, let's say, are possible convergences between fleet and travel. So welcome in this webinar.
Thank you very much, Steven, and thank you very much for inviting me today to the webinar. I'll be more than happy to share some of my thoughts on the topic if I can make the slides move, which is
There is something moving.
There is something moving. Here we go. So, first of all, can travel and fleet be partners in a mobility journey? I think, quite frankly, the easy answer to this is yes. As you have heard from Yves and from Franz before, it is a fact that there are a lot of similarities between both. On the other hand, there's obviously also some differences from a process perspective and how legacy this has always been managed in organizations, often in different parts of the organization, but for sure also in a silo if you want. And if you start changing that based, and again, I think one of the hurdles to overcome is often the company culture in those areas. But once you're through this and you bring it all together, travel and fleet can certainly be partners in a mobility journey. Because it's, and I'm trying to move, okay. Because when you go and you look at the definition of mobility, which you find on the internet, it says the ability to move or to be moved freely and easily. And that is for sure the fact that's applicable to both, right? That's applicable to travel, that's applicable to fleet. And when you move into a more in the future with different solutions and not pure the fleet or not pure the travel as such as we have known it for a long time, it is clear that also there you will find strong partnerships possible between both categories. The other thing I think, which, and I'll come back to that later on in my presentation, the current situation in the world based on the COVID-19 virus, that triggers a lot of potential change in policy, environment, etc. And it could be a golden opportunity to bring those two worlds closer together because there is that urgency or that need to make some adjustments. When you talk about the convergences, the easy one and the straightforward one, and I think in all honesty, I think that's the one where you see corporations or you see organizations bring those two worlds closer together and look at where are the synergies, it is a fact that you start with ground transportation. The car rental category is by far often the easiest one to tackle. You can look at it from a short-term rental perspective, but you can also obviously look at it from a transient travel, pure car rental perspective. And those are, that's the easy win, I would say. The other side is that ground transportation is obviously evolving. If you look at everything which has to do with rideshare options, if you look at other solutions which are currently being offered in the marketplace, it is clear that it can create a more efficient experience by offering more choice in a managed program. And that applies the same from a travel perspective as it applies from a mobility perspective related to the fleet programs out there. You have indeed, as already mentioned by some of my fellow speakers before, the internal customer expectation. You have a new generation that is indeed looking for different solutions in order to be, from a travel perspective as well as a fleet perspective, be still, I would call it sexy for the new generation of people coming into the workforce. Other solutions than the ones that we have known are needed, and new solutions, implementing new solutions can certainly bring those two worlds closer together, because again, to my earlier point, they do apply to both worlds. The sustainability objectives, already mentioned as well by the previous speakers, it's clear that both are impacted by the objectives that many corporations have from a sustainability perspective. And last but not least, when you start leveraging those two worlds closer together, it can create opportunities for cost optimization, being it a reduction or being it more value for the same. Now, then, what are the challenges or the risks, as I called it? It is less standardized from a global perspective. It's a fact that when you look at travel management, a lot of corporations over the last decade have moved into really global solutions in global programs. It is a fact that from a global perspective, a lot of the suppliers, the processes, the tools that you use within a travel program are available and are more or less standardized across the globe. Whereas from a fleet or a mobility perspective, that is still a long way to go in order to make it a more global solution. So there's certainly a couple of things that need to be looked at as far as how you can best structure that, where is the value and where is the improvement. As I said, the COVID-19 impact, in order to relaunch travel at one point in time, whenever this crisis is under control and or behind us, it will create the need of rebuilding a travel policy as we know it today. Changing a travel policy, it is maybe, and I'm convinced in some organizations that it is a golden opportunity to move indeed into the world of a mobility policy, where you can bring again the travel, the fleet, the mobility under one umbrella. The fact that you have to really review your travel policy as such because of the new normal after the COVID or due to the COVID situation, it is something that we all should look at as far as, is this an opportunity for the organization that we represent? Is there something that we need to do right now? Because it's an opportunity that it's there, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that it only comes around once. But it is certainly, there is work to be done from a policy perspective. Important in all of this, in order to make it work, is don't work in silos. Be one team to be successful, engage all the stakeholders. That is the same for building out the policy. That is the same for building out, let's say, the next generation program, mobility program in your organization. That is my contribution for today. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that one might have. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pascal. Thank you for the insights. And as mentioned, we have still some time for Q&A together with Franz Fehlner of Allianz, Pascal Struyve, and also Yves Helven. I'm looking at my NAFA colleague, David Hayward. David, are we ready for a short Q&A? I don't know if you have received questions, or do you want me to ask one or two questions?
Stephen, if you'd be so kind, please ask some questions.
Will do. So, Franz, of course, we are talking about different groups of stakeholders, and you mentioned that it's important that you can come together on a regular level. What do you mean? What is some kind of frequency that you suggest? Is it once a month? Is it every quarter? What should be, let's say, the right frequency in a large organization like yours?
So we did it like this, that we are in the first, I would say, 3 months, we had bi-weekly meetings. So only for 1 hour, not too long, because otherwise a lot of people are talking too much. And so it's better to make it short, but every 2 weeks. And afterwards, we went to a monthly meeting, and at the moment I would say we are at the end of the day, end of the journey for the new policy, and we said, okay, once a month is the right option to use, and yeah, we were really, yeah, it works out for us. So once a month.
Okay. Do you see already within your organization, Franz, that, for example, the principle of the company car is becoming less attractive to new people in your organization, and that they are really asking you also to have those new mobility options within the benefit package?
Yeah, we see it at the moment. So this is why maybe HR was coming to us. So what we see is that it has changed, because before it was always the 3-liter quattro, yeah, which was asked, and today it's an electric vehicle, yeah, or a combination of train ticket and maybe a small electric vehicle. Yeah, so it's a changed, yeah, for the, I would say, for the real senior guys, yeah, which are over 55 or 60 years. So maybe it's the same, so that they are looking for a nice company car. But if you're going to the young professionals, they are looking for mobility solutions. So they are living in the cities. They want to have a solution with what they can do, and they have to travel from A to B, and they don't need a long-term relationship or a long-term contract with a leasing company. So they want to be flexible.
Okay, Pascal, a question for you. Listening to the story of Franz, but also your story, we could have the impression that you are convinced, the both of you, that it could be good to, let's say, merge the fleet and the travel category, because there are quite some elements that could be managed in a similar way or could be combined. Is that correct?
I would agree. Yes, that's true. Doesn't necessarily need to be managed by the same people, but for sure it should be under the same line of command with the same kind of objectives. So if you put it within HR, you put it within procurement, you put it within finance, that's maybe something that depends on the company culture and how the company is organized in many cases. But it should certainly, in my opinion, be both under the same umbrella in order to find the opportunities to bring it closer together and to find the synergies, so that you don't work in silos, but that you work really in a true partnership for the same goals, the same objectives for the team or in the line of command where you report into.
Okay. Question for Yves. Yves, Pascal has also mentioned it. We are living now in quite a particular situation with a pandemic that we have never seen before. It, of course, has an impact on our business travel and also our mobility and the transportation of people and goods. it could be, I think, that perhaps fleet managers say, well, perhaps it's good to a little bit delay the investments and the search for new mobility solutions within the company. What is your reaction to an attitude like that?
Well, there's always two types of companies, right? There's those who can use a good crisis, and there's those who kind of postpone everything that's going on. My recommendation to the second type of client, those who are not doing anything, and we have in the global fleet survey, we have identified that there's about 20% of the global companies that have decided not to do anything. To those people, I would say, well, your business model is changing anyways, right? You are becoming more digital. Your employees are working from home. Start asking a couple of questions, and that can go like very simple questions, right? You know, the mileage is going down of the vehicles. Should we recalculate the contracts? That's the simplest question. On the other side of the other extreme, you have companies who are asking themselves whether they still need salespeople. Right? It is a question that is on the table with a couple of companies now. So there's this big reality. Not reacting to that big reality is a bit of a missed opportunity. But if you don't want a dramatic change, and coming back to what Franz says, if you don't want a dramatic change, try to make some small changes. Try to implement the stuff that is easy, that is not too disruptive, but that at least gets you on the path towards a new type of policy.
Okay, thank you very much. David, I don't know if there is a final question that you would like to ask. Otherwise, I think that we can try to close the webinar.
I think so. Thank you, Stephen, Pascal, Franz, and Yves. This has been a fantastic session once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we will meet with you again on the 27th of August for the final session of the Smart Mobility Thursdays. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.